Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky says Kyiv is launching a criminal investigation after a Russian missile strike on Friday reportedly killed at least 19 soldiers. Local media says that attack happened near the front line in the Zaporizhia region as an award ceremony for a military brigade was underway.
This is just another of many boneheaded moves by the Ukrainians. The Ukrainians, oftentimes following the advice of NATO, following the advice of the Americans, have made a series of boneheaded moves in this proxy war against Russia. The biggest one, obviously, in their counteroffensive, the spring offensive, which turned into the summer offensive, which I guess turned into the fall offensive. They were running headlong into the teeth of the Russian defense. Got absolutely slaughtered, lost tens of thousands of guys within a span of weeks. So 19 guys got killed. They were having an award ceremony in Zaporizhia, which is a highly contested area, which is right there close to the front lines. And the Russian drones, the Russian intelligence, their computers picked up a large gathering, and immediately they got hit with missiles. So what are you thinking? And now there's an investigation against the military officers who started this. The Ukrainian government, Zelensky, wants to punish the officers who decided to have a large gathering like that. But this is par for the course for Ukraine. What we've seen over the last 18 months is Ukraine getting annihilated. Those ISR strikes, the satellites, the drones, that combination with the artillery has proved to be extremely deadly in modern warfare. The Russians' combinations of that technology, that reconnaissance, that intelligence, the overhead surveillance with the drones loitering all over the place, extremely effective. And the Americans are actually taking notes, but they're kind of learning slowly as you see how they're advising the Israelis to attack. So they're still using traditional American fighting styles. But they're taking notes on how the Russians have shown the world this is how you should fight. So you're going to see a lot of the Russian tactics incorporated into American doctrine. But Ukraine was unable to advance properly the way the Americans told them to. You have to have a company of men. You got to go this way. You got to do this. They couldn't do it because of the overhead surveillance. The Russians, with their satellites, with their drones, they were able to see everything on the battlefield all the time. That meant Ukraine couldn't move. One of their generals said they couldn't move a force of more than 10 to 15 men. If you take more than 10 to 15 men, it's going to be picked up by surveillance and they will be struck by artillery or ballistic missiles immediately. They couldn't advance. They couldn't move. The tanks, the armored vehicles, those allegedly unstoppable infantry fighting vehicles, the Bradleys that they received from the United States, they were easy pickings in this environment. So, like I said months ago, the Ukrainians are dying in large numbers, and it's completely unnecessary because there's no way in hell that they could win. And I also said that all of these magical American weapons that the media kept praising and all these propaganda and pushing YouTubers kept praising as unstoppable and the Russians would get annihilated by them, completely useless in this war against Russia. And now these same people who were calling people like me Putin lovers, Russian stooges, for telling the truth about what's going on over there, now these same people want peace talks. Let's talk about it. This is the Bite Signal Podcast.
Do you remember that one night when we fell in love?
Almost a week ago, Ukraine top general Zelensky, I forget his first name, but Ukrainian commander-in-chief, he's the commander of all Ukrainian forces. He admitted publicly that it's over. He admitted the writing is on the wall. He actually called it a stalemate, which is not, we're going to get into that, but he called it a stalemate publicly, and Zelensky was pissed. So now Zelensky is calling for him to quote-unquote resign, which is basically him being fired, because how dare you publicly tell us what people who actually pay attention already know. So he admitted that it was over, and now it looks like his job is about to be stripped from them because the Ukrainians have lost the war. Or should I say the Americans have lost the war through their proxy Ukraine, and they're being abandoned by the Americans because the Ukrainians were dumb enough to let the Americans use them when they should have saw from the beginning exactly what this was. Like Kissinger said, paraphrasing, it's very bad to be an enemy of America, but it's deadly to be a friend of America. So you sit here thinking that you're America's friend, America uses you like a toy. These billionaires, these people in the America military industrial complex use you, burn up hundreds of thousands of Ukrainian lives, a generation of Ukrainian men dead, while these people in the military industrial complex got extremely rich off of their blood. You sit there and be used. Let them hype you up to go in there and fight while they wouldn't fight for you. And you get beat down. So this general admitted that it's over. And what's crazy is just 2 days ago, his best friend, his top aide, was killed. And it's crazy how he was killed. He wasn't killed on the battlefield. He was at a birthday party, a kid's birthday party. Apparently somebody planted a grenade in one of the birthday presents. So this top aide, his son, his 13-year-old son, was injured in the blast, and the aide died. So the General Zaluzny, he's been crying, he's been lamenting, saying this is so terrible. And some people are trying to say, oh, it was the Russians. So the Russians come in and plant a bomb and kill the Ukrainian commander-in-chief's general's friend, top aide. Or did the general piss off Zelensky and his regime, and they sent a warning to him like, look, you saw what we just did to your aide, to your best friend. Don't think for 1 second that we won't drop you off too. I think it's more likely than not that the Ukrainian government did that. So there's some divisions, and I actually said this months ago too, that one way that this may end, because we have reports of over 500,000 Ukrainian soldiers being killed in the battlefield, and who knows how many are wounded. So if you count the wounded, we can be somewhere around 1 million casualties total. But the military may have to step in and stop Zelensky because he's turned into a straight up madman. So we see the writing is on the wall. The general admitted it, and now people in the West, after a year and a half of full-blown propaganda, after the media lied to us, after the government lied to us, they're now hosting secret talks with Putin. They said they want peace. They're trying to figure out a way to stop the war, but they want to save face because of the propaganda, how they admitted that there's no way that the United States, through its proxy, could lose. Russia was poorly trained. Russia was poorly equipped. You see how they bring on dumbass 4-star retired generals like Petraeus, who knows absolutely nothing. Clearly, his success in his career was because of the people in his staff. Because when he gets on and talks about strategy, thinking for himself, he sounds like a straight up dumbass. But they brought on people like him to push propaganda in the media to let the Americans, look, let's keep sending money to the military industrial complex because the Russians are losing. Because the Ukrainians are winning. The Russians are dumb, they're retarded, they're poorly equipped, poorly trained, and they don't even want to fight. They don't know why they're there. That's what the United States media and the United States government fed to the Americans for the last year and a half. So they have what's called a Ukraine Defense Contact Group. This is 50 nations, including a lot of NATO members, 50 nations who do a variety of things to prop up Ukraine. So these guys have had a meeting on how to surrender, basically. They're trying to say, oh, it's peace talk, it's a stalemate. But here's the thing. The Ukrainian army, 75% of the Ukrainian army is gone, dead, destroyed. A lot of the Ukrainian men who haven't been forced into the Ukrainian army, yet they're trying their best to escape the country. There's resistance and protests in Kyiv about Zelensky forcing people into conscription, the draft. The Ukrainians lost. It's over. The Americans have lost their proxy war. Another proxy war. They keep starting all these proxy wars, and they try to push all this regime change, talking about getting rid of Putin and all of that. They constantly do stuff like that. The last time the Americans had a successful regime change was Japan 80 years ago. But they keep doing the same thing over and over again. So the U.S. and its flunkies push all this propaganda. had all these Americans divided. When people like me came out and spoke the truth, they said, you're a Russian bot. You're a Russian stooge. How dare you? You must be in love with Putin. They said Trump is butt buddies with Putin. How dare Trump sit here and not praise this war, sit here and not say Zelensky is the greatest man in the history of the universe, and not say that Ukraine is the greatest democracy that the world has ever seen. How dare you not say that? Because if you go against that, that means you're against feeding the military industrial complex. You're against printing American money and giving it to the military industrial complex. So a few men in a country become extremely rich while inflation, skyrocketing inflation, hits the rest of Americans. So let's go over some of these magic bullet weapons that they told us about, because there's a long list and it's completely crazy. It's actually funny to me how people fell for this. So we had the Stingers. Remember the Stingers early in 2022, shortly after the war started? Oh man, the United States Army, they're sending Stingers to the Ukrainians. It's over now. The Russians, man, you saw those helicopters go down. It's over. It's over. The Russians can't do anything about these Stingers. They are completely overrun already. Turns out the Stingers didn't even do anything. They didn't change anything on the battlefield. So they were irrelevant. But what happened was the United States paid for them. They sent them to Ukraine. Then they paid the military industrial complex billions of dollars to restock themselves with fresh, brand new Stingers. Then they sent them to the HIMARS. I saw so many propaganda videos on YouTube about this. Oh man, they got the HIMARS. These things got a good range. They're accurate. See, the Russian artillery is terrible. First of all, the Russians are running out of missiles. Second of all, they don't even use smart bombs. They use dumb missiles from the 1950s. They don't know what they're doing. We're sending them to HIMARS. Now that way, the Russians are about to be annihilated. Turns out that HIMARS were useless in this war. It's insane. Then the British, they sent them the Storm Shadow. Oh my God, hear that name, Storm Shadow. Doesn't that sound scary? We have the Storm Shadow missile. They are about to make Putin shit himself with this missile. This thing is completely unstoppable. Didn't do a goddamn thing. Completely irrelevant in a large overview of the war. What next? The M2 Bradley. Look at this Bradley, man. This thing, it's not a tank, but doesn't it look scary? Doesn't it look powerful? We're going to send hundreds of those over to Ukrainians, and the Russians are going to lose. Then the last one, the Leopard 2 tank. Remember, Germany didn't want to give it to them. It was supposed to be the highest technology, one of the greatest tanks on the planet. And Germany didn't want to give it to them because they know what would happen to it. They would just end up in a scrapyard if they went to Russia, and Germany didn't want to be embarrassed. The United States has the Abram tank, allegedly the greatest tank on the planet. But the United States also knows that the Russians could easily destroy the Abram, especially the fact that the Abram engine gets extremely hot. It gets so hot that it could be seen from outer space, from satellites. The Russians could easily pick up the Abrams and easily destroy them. And the United States, with their propaganda, they have people believing that Abram is just the best tank in history, which is not. So they didn't want to send it over there to Russia. See, they'll use it against a third world country like Iraq or someone like that. But they didn't want to use it against Russia because they would have been easily sent to the scrapyard and the United States would have been embarrassed. So they said, look, Germany, you're our flunky. So you're going to do what we tell you to do. You're going to send the Leopard 2 over there. So the Germany sent the Leopard 2 over there. And what did they say? Oh, my God, look at these Leopard 2s. We're not going to tell you that the Ukrainians put Nazi insignia and swastikas on the Leopard 2 tank while they were charging against Russia. But that's a different story. The Leopard 2s were slaughtered. I saw a video of 30 of them. It was a compilation. 30 Leopard 2 confirmed kills on Leopard 2 tanks. It's amazing. They hid the casualty numbers and they lied about all of these magic bullet weapons, how great it was, how the Russians are trash, how this would just turn the tides of war. Every time they sent the new weapons, it's going to turn the tides of war. After that, remember, it was the F-16 thing. We need the jets. We need the jets. It was just another magic bullet weapon, another system in a long line. And I didn't even mention the Patriot system. I know y'all saw that video of the Patriot when they got hit with that Kinzhal missile, that hypersonic missile. The Ukrainians launched 30 missiles at that Russian hypersonic missile. They had 30 tries to shoot down this hypersonic missile with the Patriot, the American Missile Defense System. Didn't work. The media lied. They said, oh, man, it was just damage. It wasn't destroyed. It was 99% damage. That means it's not destroyed. But it's crazy how people just easily bought into this, man. The media pushes out lies. They bring on experts to help promote their lies, and people just fall for it. And they sit here and allow Congress to bring Zelensky in an American capital, waving the Ukrainian flag in the American capital. They sit here and allow Biden and Congress to print money, boosting inflation. Because back in the day when they had wars, the public had to actually buy government bonds and stuff like that to help fund the war. But now the way the public helps fund the war is the government prints money that goes to the debt and it boosts inflation. And when people are paying more per month for all their goods and services, that's their way of paying for these wars, these trillion-dollar wars that the government likes to wage. So let's take a look at two individuals that I actually like who were kind of on my side, who didn't agree with all of this stuff, who were not following the line, and the media hated them for not following the line. Let's take a look.
Can you say if you want Ukraine or Russia to win this war?
I want everybody to stop dying. They're dying, Russians and Ukrainians. I want them to stop dying. And I'll have that done. I'll have that done in 24 hours. I'll have it done. You need the power of the presidency to do it.
But you won't say that you want Ukraine to win.
You know what I'll say? I'll say this. I want Europe to put up more money because they're in for 20 billion. We're in for 170, and they should be. And they should equalize.
Why would you cut a deal with Vladimir Putin? Why would you trust Putin to keep his end of a deal?
I don't trust Putin, but I trust Putin to follow his self-interest just as he can trust us to follow ours. And the fact of the matter is our engagement in Ukraine has been a disaster. Everybody in Ukraine would still tell you it's now stalled to a standstill. Tens, if not hundreds of thousands of deaths on both sides. Now the U.S. entering greater risk with Russia. The first time we've never had a nuclear non-proliferation agreement in place with Russia.
But
and secretly, many U.S. officials are beginning
to
admit that there has to be a deal.
Doesn't that show some naivete on your part?
We're going to have... To the contrary, the naivete is the pointless wars that we've spent in Iraq and Afghanistan. This is Iraq 2.0 unfolding again. Jim, if the people who were advocating for this war a year and a half ago are already meekly beginning to admit, even those you'll have on this network, beginning to admit that it was a failure, it has not met expectations, thousands and thousands of lives lost, greater risk, hundreds of billions of dollars later. This is a pointless war. So cut the losses now.
I think the Ukrainians have surprised a lot of people by taking it to the Russians. Why would you halt that progress?
The fact of the matter is the eastern parts of Ukraine that are occupied, well, the progress has already halted. The fact of the matter is, and you can even read what the Ukrainian general just said this week. He first admitted that it's reached a standstill. So let's be sensible, do a reasonable deal that allows Ukraine to come out with its sovereignty intact, but pull apart the Russia-China military alliance. That's what nobody's talking about. We are driving Russia further into China's hands. We need to be focused on pulling them apart and make a commitment that NATO will not admit Ukraine to NATO. That is a sensible deal. You mark my words, this is where this is going to go eventually. We might as well go there now before more lives and more dollars are wasted.
Yeah, Jim Acosta, man, this guy's an idiot. We all know how Trump used to clown him daily. That was some of the best entertainment coming from the White House during the Trump era. So he's sitting here talking talking about Ramaswamy. Why would you cut a deal with Putin? Are you in love with Putin like Trump is? He doesn't realize that his own people, his leftists, they're also trying to cut a deal with Putin. But when the leftists do it, when the Democrats cut a deal, I guess it's called peace talks. But when the Republicans want to end the war, oh, you just cutting a deal with Putin because you're corrupt. You're in bed with Putin. So let's look at this article here about these peace talks to get some more insight into what's going on. U.S. European officials broach topic of peace negotiations with Ukraine, sources say. The conversations have included very broad outlines of what Ukraine might need to give up to reach a deal with Russia. Wait, whoa! Ukraine giving up stuff? Didn't these warmongers and these stooges, these leftists who believed all this propaganda, didn't they say Ukraine won't be giving up a single inch? Didn't they say, hey, look, Russia has lost 50% of the territory that it took from Ukraine back in February 2022. You see, the Ukrainians are winning. Didn't they support Zelensky when he said he wanted all of his territory back, including Crimea? Didn't They call people like me when I said that this is a complete waste of time. It's a waste of lives. It's a lost cause. They said you're a Russian bot. You're a Putin stooge. But now all of a sudden, we're doing peace talks. So, yeah. They put in the face here of him appearing to be unhappy. But he's very happy because what's happened is with all these billions of dollars, he scraped a lot of it off the top. Word is that he's picked up $400 million of this printed U.S. money, and he has luxury properties in Miami and in Israel and in, I think, Sicily, somewhere in Italy. So when this whole thing is over, if the military doesn't drop him out first, he's going to escape and live in luxury, so probably in Miami somewhere, just like in Afghanistan when the U.S. ran off after Biden botched that retreat over there in Afghanistan. And they were saying, oh, the Afghan army, they fled. The leader, this U.S. puppet, this U.S. installed leader, president of Afghanistan, whatever his title was, this man got in a helicopter filled with millions of dollars in U.S. cash and left the country. We don't know. And to this day, we don't know where the hell he is. So I'm pretty sure he's somewhere in the U.S. living in luxury, and he's going to stay on the low. He has to stay in secret or the Taliban going to come after his ass. So he's going to be living in his riches for the rest of his life. And Zelensky's going to be the same thing. So when the U.S. engages in these proxy wars, when they have these puppet leaders and things don't go well, and the U.S. takes his ball and go home, when the U.S. just abandons the country, the leader of the country makes out like abandoned because they're pretty rich at the end while the citizens suffer. U.S. and European officials have begun quietly talking to Ukrainian government about what possible peace negotiations with Russia might entail to end the war. According to one current senior U.S. official and one former senior U.S. official familiar with the discussions. Former senior? Like, how does he have insight? Anyways, the conversations have included very broad outlines of what Ukraine might need to give. Is this article just repeating itself? Some of the talks, which officials described as delicate, took place last month during a meeting of representatives from more than 50 nations supporting Ukraine, including NATO members known as the Ukraine Defense Contact Group. The discussions are an acknowledgement of the dynamics militarily on the ground in Ukraine and politically in the U.S. and Europe, officials said. So what's happening in Europe is Slovakia, they pulled out. Their new president ran on a campaign. His campaign slogan was not another bullet. I'm not sending any more weapons over there. We see Poland and Ukraine have beef now. They were having disputes over trade, like with wheat and all that. Poland at one point saying, damn you, Ukraine, we're not sending any more weapons. We see the Germans, not the government yet, but the population in Germany, they're turning against the government saying, look, we need to get the hell out of this, man. This isn't good for us. Then you have some of these idiotic countries like Finland who fell into the propaganda. They joined NATO, and now they see that if we do go to World War III, if things really pop off, they're going to get swept up in it. See, if Russia and NATO went at it before that, Finland would have been over there, but they would have been neutral. But now, since they're saying Putin bad, they might be one of the first countries hit, and they're weak as hell. They're small population, and military is extremely weak, and U.S. and Britain would just use them as cannon fodder. And we see what's going on in the U.S., how we got the House Speaker. He said, look, we're not sending money over there. It's a lost cause, and we know that people just being rich off of this. They began amid concerns among U.S. and European officials that the war has reached a stalemate and about the ability to continue providing aid to Ukraine, officials said. It's not a stalemate. It's lost. Russia has won. Russia is going to dictate the terms of the end because they won this war. But stalemate is another term to soften it. So when they say we want peace talks, we want to reach a negotiation, it's basically saying we want to discuss our terms of surrender, but we want to save face while doing it. But they're not going to admit it to that extent. They're just going to say it's a stalemate and we're having peace talks. Biden administration officials also are worried that Ukraine is running out of forces while Russia has a seemingly endless supply. Whoa! This is the complete opposite of what all these Biden stooges were saying. All these YouTube propagandists, all these media propagandists, CNN, CBS, and all of them, weren't they saying that the Russians can't recruit? They were saying the Russian people were rebelling against Putin, that nobody in Russia liked Putin and they didn't want to fight in a failed war by Putin. Now they're saying Ukraine is running out of forces. I thought the Russians were dying in droves and Ukraine hasn't lost a single soldier. Isn't that what y'all told us? That Ukraine has not lost anybody while the Russians have lost almost all their soldiers. Wow. It's amazing how people, like this article here from NBC, it's amazing how they come out months later and print the exact opposite. They put out an article saying the exact opposite of what they were saying before, and they pretend as if they never said what they said before. Let's just move on and not look back at it. Crazy. Ukraine is also struggling with recruiting. Whoa! I thought Russia was struggling with recruiting. Ukraine? What? Are you telling me that the chain gangs are real? How they have vans and buses driving around through cities in Ukraine, grabbing military-age males, forcing them into the vans and taking them to boot camp, forcing them to fight the Russians, sending them to the front line to die? Are you telling me that it's true that the Russians, after they killed a couple of tanks, they pulled out the bodies of 70-year-old men? Are you telling me that when some of these Ukrainian units surrender, they're filled with untrained 50 and 60-year-old men, old-ass men? It's true that the Ukrainians have old men and teenagers, 15, 16 years old men and teenagers, being forced to fight in the United States military-industrial complex war to protect Zelensky's regime and to enrich some already rich billionaires in the United States. They're using teenagers and old men for this. I guess it's true, and I guess they're going to admit it after all. It has recently seen public protests about some of President Volodymyr Zelensky's open-ended conscription requirements. And there's unease in the U.S. government with how much less public attention the war in Ukraine has garnered since the Israel-Hamas war began nearly a month ago, the official said. So this whole Israel-Hamas thing, it actually helps the United States, because I talked about this. I put out a video saying NATO don't want this smoke, and I broke down exactly why NATO is ill-equipped to go to war against Russia right now. And I also put out a video talking about how nobody cares, about how the Europeans, specifically how the Europeans are getting fed up with this war. I put this out before this Israeli-Hamas war. The writing was on the wall beforehand, but the United States didn't have an exit route. People were still praising Ukraine, Slavic Ukraine, all that crap. People were still delusional. But the United States government and the military knew that it was over, but they didn't have a way out of it. But when this thing happened in Israel, all the public attention is on Israel now. And now they're saying, well, nobody cares about Ukraine. So they want this to just quietly go away. We're not going to mention it anymore. Let's just keep talking about Israel. This is a way for them to get out of it without too many eyes on it. They want to sneak out. The United States wants to sneak out in the middle of the night. They don't want another botched failure, another botched military failure during Biden's regime. Officials fear the shift could make securing additional aid for Kyiv more difficult. Some U.S. officials have privately begun using the term stalemate, a propaganda term, let's say surrender, because that's what's happened, to describe the current battle in Ukraine, with some saying it may come down to which side can maintain the military force the longest. Well, we knew this in February 22 when it happened. When you guys decided to hype up Ukraine, we knew it was only a matter of time, after hundreds of thousands of men, after 1 million casualties, maybe you guys will see the writing on the wall. Neither side is making large strides on the battlefield lie, which some U.S. officials now describe as a war of inches. So what I predicted to happen, I said probably this fall, late this fall, the Russians were going to have Ukraine at a point where their army was damn near inoperable because they killed too many Ukrainian soldiers. And I said, well, what happened is either during this winter, if they get a hard freeze, if they get a lot of ice, hard ice on the ground, or at the latest, spring 2024, the Russians will start pushing up and they'll eventually stop at the Dnieper River and then wait for the United States then. Because I said if the United States doesn't back down, if they keep hyping up the proxy, if they keep provoking, if they're not showing any signs of letting this thing end, the Russians will push all the way to the Dnieper River. And then they'll say, okay, Americans, what y'all want to do now? Because you see, there's no way in hell that you can stop us from doing what we want to do with Ukraine. So it looks like America is coming to terms with that publicly faster than I actually thought. So this thing may end a little sooner. So we're going to see, though. Officials have privately said Ukraine likely only has until the end of the year or shortly thereafter before more urgent discussions about peace negotiations should begin. You mean after 100% of their army is destroyed? We're 75% now, 100%. And Russia engaged in this war of attrition with NATO, with the United States, after they said, well, the United States spends more money than any military on earth, than the next 10 combined. The United States has the best technology, and we also have NATO, and it's just Russia and Belarus, and they're trash. So we're going to send our weapons against Russia's trash weapons, and we're going to see who wins. So Russia said, all right, well, let's go. So Russia outlasted NATO and the United States. All that money, they said, well, Russia doesn't spend that much money because they're poor and they're broken, they're dumb. Russia didn't need to spend all that money. United States spent way more money on the war than Russia did, because there's a lot of corruption. People think just because the United States has this massive military budget, it means the military is completely elite and way better. No, a lot of this money is bundled and chipped off the top because people think that other countries are just corrupt. But the military industrial complex, man, these people are getting so rich. These people who make the uniforms, who send bottles of water over there, who make packets of food, who make the bullets and all, these corporations are getting rich as hell. So a lot of this massive budget, this enormous military budget, goes to these corporations. Then another massive chunk of it goes to the Navy. And what people don't understand, they keep talking trash about the Russian carrier. What people don't understand is Russia's military doctrine is not the same as the United States. Russia doesn't need a massive navy because Russia isn't a naval power. Russia is a land power. Russia is right there connected to Asia and Europe. So when a large war pops off, Russia fights on the ground. Russia is a ground army. The United States is isolated from all the other powers in the world. So the United States has two massive oceans. So the United States is a naval power. That's why a massive portion of U.S. military budget goes into the Navy, to building these new ships, maintaining these new ships. So you have this massive Navy the United States needs to maintain. You got hundreds of military bases across the world because America wants to be an empire and the world police. And you got all these corporations skimming money off the top. These corporations making billions of dollars. That's where this massive military budget goes. But people think, oh, a massive budget equals an absolute elite army, and it doesn't. U.S. officials have shared their views on such a timeline with European allies, officials said. Any discussions about negotiations are up to Ukraine, Adrian Watson, spokesperson for the National Security Council, said in a statement. That's a lie, because Ukraine actually tried to make peace with Russia in March 2022, 5 weeks after the invasion. London and D.C. stopped the negotiations. They're dictating the terms. We are focused on continuing to stand strongly in support of Ukraine as they defend their freedom and independence against Russian aggression. How about defending Ukrainian lives? How about not another Ukrainian man dead? 500,000 men dead. A generation of Ukrainian men. And you're sitting here pushing propaganda. We're caring about Ukrainian independence and freedom. You think these men and these families want to see all of this? You think these men wanted to be dead over America's proxy war? The best thing you can do for Ukraine is push them to quickly make peace, to just surrender to Russia and live, survive. Stop fighting until you're completely wiped out. United States, just like Putin predicted this, man, he said the United States is going to fight us until the last Ukrainian. And that's absolutely true, because these guys don't give a damn. You saw Mitt Romney sitting here talking about, and Ben Shapiro, I saw him, he was regurgitating what Mitt Romney said. Look, we only spent 5% of our budget. We haven't lost any American men, which you have, because you have American soldiers over there in secret, but that's a different story. We haven't lost any men, and we're only spending a little money. This is great, man. This is great. This is a fantastic investment. What about the 500,000 Ukrainian men dead? Do you give a damn? Clearly not. An administration official also noted that the U.S. has participated with Ukraine in discussions of its peace summit framework, but said the White House is not aware of any other conversations with Ukraine about negotiating at the moment. President Joe Biden has been intensely focused on Ukraine's depleting military forces. Wow. Depleting military forces, according to two people familiar with the matter. Manpower is at the top of the administration's concern right now. One said, the U.S. and its allies can provide Ukraine with weaponry. Not anymore. That's a war of attrition. You're running out. This person said, but if they don't have competent forces to use them, it doesn't do a lot of good. Wow. So we gave them weapons, we gave them money, we gave them all that, but they're too stupid. They're a bunch of idiots, and that's why they lost. Wow. You see that, Ukrainians? You see how y'all got used by the Americans? They're throwing you under the bus, calling out idiots and incompetent. You guys were used, man. If I were you guys, I would be pissed with Zelensky and with the American government, because they're the ones who suckered your government into sending you guys to die in their proxy war. So yeah, hey, that's the story right now. That's what's going on in Ukraine. They're looking for a way to surrender but save face while also doing. The United States is simply repeating a pattern that these third world countries haven't figured out yet. Vietnam, we'll help you until it's inconvenient, then we'll take our ball and go home. We'll do it in Iraq and Afghanistan too. We'll help you until it's inconvenient for us, and then we'll just get on our ships, because we're naval power. We'll just get on our ships and sail away and leave you to whatever the hell happens. Ukraine, we'll hype you up because we can use you as propaganda to send money to the military-industrial complex. But when it becomes inconvenient for us, we're going to abandon you. So if you enjoyed today's episode, leave a like, share it, and I'll see you guys next time.